Let's start with this. It's midterm year, 2026 is here. Attorney General Chris Carr, you're running for governor. Thanks for making the time.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
So you just walked out of the Faith and Freedom luncheon here. We're just a couple steps away from the Capitol. I think this is a good place to start. Legislative session has begun. What do you want to see the state legislature tackle this year?
Yeah, first I want to see property tax relief. And what the Speaker has done and what the House has come out with makes a lot of sense. It is what I'm hearing all across the state, whether I'm in Rabun County or I'm down in Thomas County. It's the oppressive nature of property taxes. So to be able to cap it, to talk about some of the ideas that we have to provide relief in a world where affordability is a big deal, I'd love to see that. Also want to continue to focus on crime and keeping people safe, focusing on keeping law enforcement safe. There's doxing that we still see online where they're going after law enforcement officers, focusing on mental health, focusing on kids. I love that we have banned cell phones in elementary and middle school. I'd like to see that go to high school as well. So there's going to be a lot going on, but it's all got to be about keeping Georgia's tax burden the lowest in the Southeast, keeping people safe, focusing on affordability, and making sure that we're still a place where businesses want to create jobs.
You'd go right to taxes. That's something that we've heard a lot from a number of candidates, not just for governor, but from lieutenant governor as well. One of your opponents in the race for governor, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, he's called for the elimination of the state income tax. Do you support that?
I support lowering the income tax, but his plan is based on unicorns and leprechauns and puppy dogs and a magic wand. That's not going to give taxpayers relief. I believe we can lower income taxes responsibly. Like the taxpayer relief fund that North Carolina has is a great model that we should be looking at. But what people are talking about are property taxes. That's why what the Speaker and the House are doing is actually going to provide relief. They've got a plan. I think this is the issue that we got to focus on. But remember, in Georgia, taxes are income, property, sales, fees, and others. We need to be lowering the entire tax burden away from the people of Georgia, not shifting it around like the Lieutenant Governor wants to do.
Let me ask you about the math on this, though. Obviously, it's clear from your statements you don't believe that the Lieutenant Governor's plan is feasible, but down to brass tacks, why not? Why do you think eliminating the income tax wouldn't work?
Well, because there's a huge hole in the budget. And the only way you're going to be able to do is raise the tax burden, either taxes on the people of Georgia through sales tax or higher property tax, or like he's done, this state has been built on economic development. People have come here for jobs. They stayed here because of jobs. The first thing that the Lieutenant Governor said in an interview with you is he's going to eliminate all of the tax incentives that around this state provide relief and provide opportunity. This state has been built on agriculture, manufacturing, trade, and the military. We provide incentives in a responsible fashion in this state, and he wants to take that away. I think that's just wrong.
And now, to be clear, because he's not here in the interview to speak for himself, I think what he said in that conversation a few months ago was that he was looking at scaling back some of it. I don't think there were specifics about ripping them all up.
Yeah, taking away all of the corporate incentives that we've had that have built this state that we have done in a responsible fashion. Because what he said is basically Governor Kemp and Governor Deal and Governor Perdue and everybody else before him did it irresponsibly, and I disagree with him on that.
You pointed to another element of your campaign kind of stump focus, which was on safety. The Attorney General, core job, that's a core component of what you do. There's been some movement in a long-running case that was a marquee case in your office. I'm sure you know what I'm going towards here. In 2023, your office handed down a number of indictments against dozens of protesters against the Public Safety Training Center. A judge recently threw out dozens of the RICO indictments in that case. What would you say to somebody who's watched this saga go on for years, sees the RICO charges get tossed out, and might think the case is not moving anywhere productive?
What I would say to them is, I have said from the beginning, we are going to hold responsible those who lit construction vehicles on fire, lit police cars on fire, and shot police officers. And we are going to do that. The legal process will play out. The judge has provided us with a certificate to appeal, which we will do. But substantively, you have a right in this nation and in this state to peacefully disagree with government. But political violence is not free speech, and I'm going to hold accountable in Georgia those that we call domestic terrorists, and we're going to use all the legal tools at our disposal to make sure that people are held accountable. And we're going to continue to move forward.
Let me ask you another question on the topic of speech, activism, public safety, protesting. You're running for governor right now. That is a big job that encompasses a lot of responsibilities. Last week we saw a situation in Minnesota where an ICE agent fatally shot a woman. The government, protesters, they have different views of what happened, who's at fault, and who bears responsibility and who was to blame, but it's kicked off a series of serious protests in the city of Minneapolis. If you were the governor here in Georgia, you faced a similar situation, how would you deal with it?
I would say, please wait till we get all the facts, number one. And the second thing I learned on day one in law school is you don't have a disagreement with law enforcement out on the streets. Again, you have a right to peacefully protest, but you don't have a right to use a car as a weapon. You don't have a right to light police cars on fire. You don't have a right to shoot police officers. So again, there is an easy and bright line between peaceful protest and violence. And I would just encourage people, absolutely you can peacefully protest, but you cannot weaponize your speech, and you cannot weaponize your ability, to get involved in a law enforcement action. That's never going to be good for the individual, and it's not going to be good for law enforcement, and it's not good for society. But let's wait, let's get all the facts before we start, I think, placing blame.
Affordability has been, if there is a buzzword of the campaign cycle so far, affordability has got to be at the top of the list. You alluded to it yourself.
Yeah.
We just did a series of interviews with minority and majority leaders in the state House and the state Senate, so Democrats and Republicans. Democrats and Republicans are both focusing on affordability in this cycle. Is this going to be a situation where we see bipartisan togetherness on the issue of affordability, or do you anticipate we're starting off close in the beginning of a campaign cycle, and as the year goes on, Republicans and Democrats will define the issue and the solutions differently?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the legislature this year. Obviously, there's a lot of politics that's going to be played. But all I can say is this: when I'm governor, my leadership style has been to sit around the table, get people that know what they are talking about in particular areas like housing and healthcare and energy and all of the issues that really matter, education, that really matter to Georgians. Let's come up with real concrete solutions to make sure that the burden on the Georgia taxpayer and the Georgia resident comes down. That's what I'm going to do as governor.
Let's end on this topic, and it's something you and I have talked about a little bit before, but as time moves on, there's always evolutions. You have been critical of one of your opponents, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, using his leadership committee to fundraise. That allows him to fundraise through the legislative session. You can't. You can't raise money during the session. How is that impacting your campaign?
It's not impacting the campaign, except that the people of Georgia see how unfair it is. It's an unfair process that one person gets to do something that the two others that are running don't get to. And we've seen this impact. People know what's right and wrong. They can sniff out when somebody's trying to rig the system. And look, the lieutenant governor's got a long history of understanding how to use his office to make sure that it benefits him. He's doing it here, but the people of Georgia see that. They don't like it. There's a lawsuit that's been filed. I filed a lawsuit. The federal judge said, yep, you've been wronged, but wanted us to go after the entire statute itself. Secretary of State Raffensperger's filed a lawsuit saying, well, wait a minute. If he gets one, we should get a leadership pack as well, and we'll see where that goes.
Now, folks who are long-term watchers of Georgia politics, they'll see that you're critical of the leadership committees now, but they will likely remember that there were earlier legal challenges, and as the Attorney General, you defended the leadership committees at the time. So what's changed?
Nothing has changed. It's the proper use of a leadership pack versus the illegal and improper use. The governor uses it for purposes of being the governor. The Speaker of the House uses it for purposes of the House and being Speaker. What the Lieutenant Governor is doing is using it to run for a different office. It's wrong. A federal judge said it's wrong, and that's what the people of Georgia see. This is what the Lieutenant Governor does, and it isn't right.
And just to be clear, you say a federal judge said it's wrong. A federal judge has had a chance to toss that out and ban the Lieutenant Governor from using the committee and has not done that.
Has not, but said I have been wrong, just said you got to go after the statute. Now the Secretary of State has filed a lawsuit. We'll see what that one does.
Let's end here. We always ask folks this closing question. Your elevator pitch to a voter who still has not made up their mind would be what?
Jobs and safety matter in this state. There is a big difference between Republicans and Democrats. This state has been built on agriculture, manufacturing, trade, the military. We've got to keep taxes low, keep our streets safe, keep affordability front and center, and make sure that everybody's got a good job.
Attorney General Chris Carr, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.